Once that, a short story that seems completely pointless, and then you realize there's some racial tension thrown in, and then you realize that that racial tension leads to a life change for a character, and then you realize, oh, well, this is a first time for that character. It can't be Ernest Hemingway, but it is. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we're here for a video which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the short story discussion playlist. Number two being a short story by short story read along of Ernest Hemingway, the complete short stories, the Finca Vigia edition. This short story is 10 Indians. So if you didn't know if there would be some racial tension thrown in, the title might give that away. This video will have three separate sections: a So What Happens recap of the video, a literary criticism section, and finally a writer's corner for the short story 10 Indians by Ernest Hemingway. What notes can we take from this short story as writers? So, what happened? Nick Adams is on a 4th of July journey home with the Garner family. As they travel, they encounter 9 intoxicated Native Americans along the road, prompting the Garners to make derogatory remarks about indigenous peoples. A little bit more than that, though. They also make fun of Nick, and they make fun of their own sons a little bit. They also tease Nick about his rumored relationship with Prudence Mitchell, a Native American girl, which he denies despite feeling a mix of emotions at that time in the story. It turns out that he only knows what he has once he feels he's lost it. Upon reaching the Garner's home, Nick declines their invitation to stay for supper and proceeds to his own house. There, his father mentions having seen Prudence in the woods with another boy, Frank Washburn, implying they were intimately involved. This revelation deeply hurts Nick, leading him to bed with a sense of heartbreak. Now, anyone who has been through these sorts of things, you know, what happens is it feels like the world is ending until you go to bed, and then you realize you woke up in the morning, and everything does go on. So there are some literary criticism talking points here for this short story to get into, and there's outside of the racial type stuff, because I think that a lot of the tension in this story between the races is more our sideism versus their sideism. And you have to imagine that the Native Americans in the story feel the same way. And we don't really get any payoff for the characters from that until it's in an actual character moment, not when it's just a commentary on the race versus the race. So to ignore the racial stuff going on in the short story would be not to give the short story credit for what it is doing, and it is acknowledging those tensions. Nick's father, through the stories that we have with him, really has a lot of goings on with the Native Americans that are around where they live, even if he is sometimes he becomes the avatar for the white man in those situations. So the first thing to point out, obviously, here is the short story is called 10 Indians, but when they drive past that group of Native Americans, there are only 9 of them. And we get the commentary, I know there was only 9 because we counted them, right? So that is the commentary on our side versus their side. 10 Indians, but they saw 9. Well, a 10th Native American is mentioned. It is the girlfriend. Now I'm forgetting her name. What is her name? Not Billy Tabasaw. That's not her. What is her name? Prudence. So what is going on with that title is it is a commentary on there are us, there are them, we are not commingled. Even when individuals from each try to commingle, there is going to be some type of misunderstanding. So the 9 Indians, the 9 Native Americans that they see on the side of the road on the way home from the 4th of July party are, or the it's not a party, I guess it's a baseball game. They went to a baseball game. The 9 Native Americans they see on the side of the road there are are the same people as Prudence. So when Prudence is brought up in conversation, everyone else in the car besides Nick is kind of accepting that's not us. We are not that. If you get into the Nick Adams stories, oftentimes when Nick's father is brought up and the work that he does with Native Americans is brought up, there is a misunderstanding somewhere. There is someone thought someone else was going to do something, or someone thought someone else meant one thing when actually it was another, or you have I can't remember what short story it is, the one where Nick is with his father and his uncle as they go to deliver a baby, and there's a dead man in the bed above the delivery, right? So was that the father? Did he off himself because he was not the father, or because he was the father and he didn't think he could do the whole family thing? What's going on there? There is misunderstanding. Here again, there is misunderstanding. Does Prudence think that she is in a relationship with Nick the way that Nick seems to think he's in a relationship with Prudence, but denies it the entire while? If you were Prudence and you knew that Nick was denying that relationship, would you be solitary to him? Right? So there's a whole lot of questions going on, but the base of that title is saying, look, we're separate. We're not the same, which is further explicated by the fact that Nick's father is telling him about this, right? Nick's father, first off, it's your son, so you're going to want to shield him from the worst of it. The worst of it would be finding out on his own or never finding out and just being cuckolded the whole time, right? But Nick's father says, hey, Bud, that girl you were dating, she was with another guy, right? So that is saying, hey, you're mine, Nick, you're my son. I am valuing you over the sort of privacy that we would give to Prudence. Now, there's maybe a double entendre maybe a triple entendre with the day of the year, right? At the beginning of this short story, the Garners and Nick are returning from a celebration. The party is over. That's when Nick finds out that his heart is being broken. Also, it's the 4th of July. That's America's birthday. And the celebration is over. We are still separate from they. So there is some of that going on there as well. It is the symbol of the party, the symbol of the celebration is twofold. One, it's over while Nick is getting his heart broken. Number two, the celebration was for the United States, basically white folk, separate from Native Americans. And that is an interesting thing as well. Now, one small thing that I guarantee you was not accidental. Nick's father gives him a piece of pie. That pie was huckleberry pie. Ernest Hemingway was a very big fan of Mark Twain. Ernest Hemingway said that, I believe it was Huckleberry Finn, but certainly it was one of Mark Twain's novels, was the greatest American novel ever, and there would never be another one better. So that is not thrown in there on accident. Huckleberry Finn, also a character that is dealing with racial tensions and separation and us versus them in his stories as well, and someone dealing with a coming-of-age story. One thing that maybe One thing that is interesting to note with this short story that I think probably gets overlooked pretty often because of just normalcy bias, maybe. These people, the Garners, are in a horse-drawn carriage. Ernest Hemingway was born in 1899. Cars were not ubiquitous until he would have been basically in middle school. Certainly. Now, as far as Oak Park, Illinois, where Hemingway was born, was, I believe, that was at the time very much on the outsides of city. I think that was very sort of borderline rural at the time. Might be wrong, but the penetration of cars into that area would probably have been later. I mean, you don't think of Hemingway as a guy who rode horses growing up. You think of Hemingway fairly current. You think of Hemingway fairly postmodern. But really, he was a modernist. Um, so this idea of Hemingway writing a story about a kid who was where the main mode of transportation was horses, you don't think of it very often, but that's absolutely right. Hemingway, born in 1899, would have seen a lot of, maybe not a whole lot, right? But a lot of his childhood would have been in the basically pre-automobile era. So, very interesting idea there. But the moving on to the writer's corner here, the one writer's note that I have here is this. It's very easy, I think, to look at this story and say, so what? You know, it's a slice of life story. Not a whole lot going on. There's something small going on in one person's life. He's been cheated on, or he feels he's been cheated on. And I mean, how old would you say he is? There's probably a middle schooler, maybe early high school, something like that. Does it really matter all that much in the grand scheme of Nick Adams' life? No, but in immediate, the immediate future of Nick Adams' life, it does. So, one note to take away from this as a writer is just this. Ernest Hemingway has his words have lived for 100 years now. In a lot of his short stories, you can read them and very easily think, so what? So how has this literature lived for so long? It's not just that he's good with dialogue. Even in this short story, he's good with dialogue. A character will ask a question and get an answer to a question he didn't ask, which is very realistic, right? It tells you a lot about what people are assuming about what the other person is saying. But this slice of life story, that doesn't mean anything on the grand scale. It's not about World War I. It's not about in the fall of countries. It's not about anything grandiose. It's about a kid going to bed after a 4th of July party. Sure, he was cheated on. Okay, who cares? It's the first time Nick has been cheated on. In a lot of ways, what Hemingway is doing with this story is giving advice on how to get through something like that. That's literature as a repository for wisdom, right? So Ernest Hemingway is saying, look, you're going to get your heart broken. Go to bed, and when you wake up in the morning, you'll have a couple good hours, and then you'll remember, and it'll suck then, but you'll sleep it off. You'll sleep like liquor. You'll sleep it off. And that makes the story have more relevance to more people than just some kid getting his heart broken. It becomes a repository of wisdom from seeing the first time this character, Nick Adams, has had his heart broken. Then you get to talk about the racial tensions in the story. Then you get to talk about the father-son dynamics. Then you get to talk about the Garners who are in the front there talking to husband and wife talking to each other and making jokes between themselves. And then you get to talk about the relevance of the 4th of July. Then you get to talk about the relevance of Mark Twain. But it all comes from that small slice of life in this short story. So, anyway, that's what I have for this, the 10 Indians review in the Ernest Hemingway read along on the channel. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button. Stick around for more literature on the channel. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.